For those of us who have been able to go to college, think back to how difficult that first year and the transition into the institution you attended was. If you were like me, you had a lot of questions, you wanted where to go to have connection to your peers, or maybe you just had a lot of built-up anxiety. As a first-generation and lower-income student myself, I definitely had those experiences. Now, as a graduate student and a higher education professional, I have a rapid interest in exploring what this experience is like for other first-generation and lower-income students, or as I'll define them as FGLI students for the rest of the presentation in higher education. This led me to develop a research study to where I could hear from other FGLI students at Florida State University about what their experiences are like here at Florida State. So what I did is I developed a study that looked at the literature that had already been published on the FGLI student experience in higher education, in which there is a vast amount of literature on. But instead, I wanted to see what are the comparisons that can be made depending on the level of support. This led me to do student interviews with two different student populations at Florida State. FGLI students who are part of the Center for Academic Retention and Enhancement, or CARE, and then students who fall outside of that, students who are not receiving any type of programmatic support from CARE. So as a result, I engaged with these student interviews. I did 10 in total, and I went through a coding process, which essentially means I looked at the interview transcripts and I really dig deep into the stories and experiences of these students. This allowed me to pick up on the different aspects that students were talking about so that I could bring it to the other stories that students were talking about in their interviews, which then allowed me to get a better picture. So just to go over one example I have on the screen, and the teal color is the social aspects of students that they encountered during their first year. This allowed me to really pick up on what students were facing in terms of challenges and barriers, but also what are some of the successes they were having as well as they came to Florida State. Then, this allowed me to go back to the quotes themselves, get back to that bigger picture of the stories that the students were telling. Because in this research process, I never wanted to lose picture about why I was doing this work in the first place. I truly wanted to listen to the voices and experiences of these students so that those voices and experiences could then be provided to institutional administrators and professionals who work with these student populations already, but also those who are not working with these students as much as they might want to be. And also, how can we reimagine and revision the programs and services that we have at Florida State to be more FGLI student aligned? So, some of the quotes that I share on the screen are just a few examples from the non-CARE FGLI student populations. But I can assure you that there's a plethora of other stories and experiences that the students have shared with me that really highlight the true salient examples of the areas on campus that we must address so that our FGLI students are being successful in their endeavors. Of course, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So what I did following this is I started to get thematic takeaways from the coding process that I've done. So with the non-CARE FGLI student population, I started to look at their data as a whole and say, what can we actually do with this data and what can we provide to CARE and other administrators on campus? So just to point out one of the thematic takeaways that I have, 2 out of the 4 non-CARE FGLI students that I spoke with brought up their immigrant identities as being another salient example of what is important to them and their experiences at Florida State. This helps us also realize that FGLI students are not just based on their first generation and lower income identities, but their other identities as well that impact their experiences. So what can we do next? We can continue to reevaluate our programs and services to make them more FGLI student aligned. Thank you.